Today's episode of Why Music Matters is sponsored by Buffalo Spree magazine. For the past 60 years, Buffalo Spree has been Western New York's guide to living, dining, and entertainment. Every issue helps readers take advantage of the best of Western New York. Whether it's celebrating the exciting changes in our community, introducing you to people you should know, or giving you a taste of what's new on the food and dining scene, Spree has got you covered. Since the beginning, Spree has been a champion of Western New York's arts community, keeping you up to date on what's on stage, on view, and in the clubs and concert halls. Pick up the latest issue to get a closer look, or visit buffalospree.com. If you subscribe with the code JEFFSENTME, you'll get a year of Spree and a free digital edition for just $10. Look for Buffalo Spree's annual Best of Western New York issue, out on stands in late June.
That's the power. That's why music matters,
Yes.
because it's so personal.
Yeah.
But yet it's a metaphor for life and the obstacles that are put in front of you and how you navigate around them and through them.
Hey there, music lovers. Welcome to Why Music Matters, a podcast where we examine the power and influence that music can wield in our lives. I'm your host, Jeff Miers. Today on the podcast, I'm happy to welcome former Congressman and current president of Shea's Performing Arts Center in Buffalo, New York, Brian Higgins. After growing up in Buffalo and graduating from Buffalo State College and Harvard University, Brian worked his way from the Buffalo Common Council through the New York State Assembly and finally to the U.S. House of Representatives, where he served as Democratic representative of New York's 26th congressional district for more than a decade. Brian left office in early 2024, citing what he called a growing dysfunction in Congress as his reason for moving on. So why is a career politician a guest on a podcast dedicated to the majesty of music? Well, for as long as I've known him, Brian has been a passionate supporter of music and the arts, and a career in politics did nothing to dull his deep love for music. Brian remains a true fan, one who speaks of certain concert experiences in his life as nigh-on religious events. His career's second act as the president of Shea's places him in a position to have significant impact on music and the arts in our region's culture. Brian Higgins has turned his passion for music into something tangible. Welcome to Why Music Matters, Brian. Welcome to Why Music Matters. I'm your host, Jeff Miers, and I'm thrilled and honored today to be joined by former Congressman Brian Higgins, now president of Shea's Theater and Performing Arts Center. Welcome to the podcast, Brian. It's a thrill to have you here.
Jeff, I'm honored to be here with you. I've always been a fan. You know that.
Thank you. And we've talked many times over the years while I was at the Buffalo News. And I still have saved and framed a letter from you that you wrote about one of our mutual heroes, I think Bruce Springsteen. I saved that. It meant a lot to me.
Wow.
But anyway, I'm thrilled to have you here, and I think I'm speaking for a lot of people when I say thrilled to have you back in Buffalo.
Thank you very much.
And I would be remiss not to say we're grateful for the 20 years that you represented us in Congress, and impressed that you made it that long.
Well, it was a great...
Welcome home.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jeff. I love Congress, but it's not the institution that I came to 19 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's very different. It's a resilient institution. It'll come back. But, my thinking was, I did my best. I never went to Washington to change the world. I went to change my community.
Yeah.
And I think that is consistent with the tradition of Congress, that people come from all over the country
to
represent their community.
Yeah.
And I think what's happened, and we can't believe everything on social media, but I think social media certainly has had an influence. People will get elected from their communities, move to Washington for various reasons, family, they have young kids, that kind of stuff. And they become immersed in the culture. And they lose their sense of, I think, purpose. Whereas I was lucky, I only had an hour flight home every week. But every time, my staff knew that last votes, I'm out. And it was when I would arrive at the airport, it was an urgent reminder always as to why I was sent there in the first place. Yeah. So it was a great honor to be able to represent this community in the United States Congress.
And you made some lasting impact.
I hope so. Thank you.
In many ways. And it is true that this isn't a political podcast, but I'll get this out of my system. It is true that you never abandoned us, and you always represented your community.
Thank you.
It didn't look like you were, I'm here for career advancement alone type of thing at all. So we appreciate that.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that.
Help make Buffalo better. And now, at Shea's, which I really want to delve into, but I'd like to start by going back to Springsteen for a minute. Sure. Because I know how much that music means to you, what it represents. I feel the same way. And it's really cool that now you're at Shea's when, among many other things, Springsteen launched his 1978 Darkness on the Edge of Town tour at that venue. The show was just legendary. I didn't live in Buffalo yet. I didn't see it. I listened to it on bootlegs all through college, and you can find it now. But wow, that's kind of a nice full circle thing. Can you talk about that a bit?
So Jeff, my dad, Dan Higgins, was on the Buffalo City Council in the mid-1970s, that period where there was a lot of uncertainty about the future of Shea's. Yeah. There was some talk about selling it. Somebody who wanted to purchase it wanted to demolish it and use it for parking. So there was a manager there by the name of Kurt Mangel. And Kurt Mangel actually lived in Shea's so as to keep anybody from bulldozing the facility. And it went through the city council, and my dad was one of the votes that voted to save it. So, typical, 17, 16-year-old, we were all Springsteen fans coming off of the Born to Run era. Yeah. We waited a long time for the next album, Darkness.
You went through a lot before that happened.
And so I asked my dad if he could use his influence to get me tickets. So the show was sold out. It's 3,019 seats. And his friend Kurt Mangel, I went over and picked it up. I'll never forget it. It was a ticket envelope with no tickets in it. It said, admit Brian Higgins and 12 others.
Wow.
All my friends. And we had the West box for the show.
You were a popular guy.
I'm telling you.
With your friends.
And we paid for it. They were like, I think $1.75 at that time. And that show was just wild. Yeah. And I thought, and I think Kurt Mangel did as well, that we had the potential of dislodging the box from the foundation, because it was just a lot of fun. But it was a very interesting time, because I remember my dad, he took me to the record store in the Main Place Mall. I think it was Cabbages. So we were in his office in City Hall, and he took me over and bought me Darkness on the Edge of Town.
Cool.
Yeah, and we just had a ball. And it was like a bonding moment for he and I, And he was a wonderful man. We lost him a few years back, but I just always remember that whole period of time. And Springsteen, when you look at the set list, it's a set list that he's doing for the most part today. Yeah. And the songs that he wrote, and in a very, personal way. I mean, you think about it, he became an international star with Born to Run. and he was on the cover of Time and Newsweek in the same week.
Yeah.
So he was like, and what did he do? He reverted back to his home and to talk about, his relationship with his father. And those are the kinds of things that everybody can associate with and find inspiration from. So that's the power. That's why music matters, because it's so personal.
Yeah.
But yet it's a metaphor for life and the obstacles that are put in front of you and how you navigate around them and through them. And that's Robert Coles, the child psychologist from Harvard, and Bruce Springsteen became very, very good friends. He wrote Springsteen's America.
Yeah, it's a great book if anyone is interested and hasn't read it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just beautiful, beautiful stuff. But Springsteen actually, he dropped out of community college, Bruce Springsteen. But there's a lesson there. And he used to go and audit Robert Coles' classes at Harvard. And he not only taught, psychology, he taught ethics, but really fascinating guy. And they became very, very good friends. And then Robert Coles started a publication. His problem was he paid writers too much. As opposed to $1 a word, he paid them $5 a word, and ran into trouble. And sure enough, Springsteen did 2 acoustic shows for him as fundraisers to save the publication. So it's just it's just stuff like that. And you look at the whole history of music. Like Dave Matthews, one of my favorite songs is Gray Street, which is
song.
There's two interpretations as to what the inspiration one was. Dave Matthews' sister Anne was murdered in a murder-suicide in South Africa. There's that. And then there's the other interpretation, 1974, the poet Anne Sexton, who was suffering from depression, committed suicide. But just a beautiful, is like gray is a non-color, and just, songs like that, the songs of like Coldplay and, the one, The Scientist, beautiful song.
Great song.
And, the story behind that is that Nathaniel Hawthorne wrote in 1846 a short story called The Birthmark. Mm-hmm. And it's a story about a scientist who thought his wife was beautiful, but for the fact that she had a birthmark on her cheek. And he concocts this potion and gives it to her to get rid of this. And she died of toxicity.
It's just Hawthorne, very dark.
Yeah. So
but beautiful.
So I mean, it's again, music. It's so personal.
Yeah.
But it's so universal.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah. So I just I think you were writing for, was it Blue Dog?
Yeah, Blue Dog Press was something we started after Buffalo Beat. So yes, I was.
Yeah, and you did a review. I was in the State Assembly.
Yes.
And you did a review. It must have been one of the albums. And I wrote you that note because it was just so beautifully written. Everything that I experienced with Springsteen and his music, including waiting long periods of time from one album to the next. He got better later on.
It did.
Yeah, and but that was you captured. You captured the essence of him.
Oh, I appreciate it. That the song, it was a review, I think, of the reunion tour, and they put out a live album of it, recorded in New York City.
Yeah.
At Madison Square Garden, and
which is a great YouTube watch.
Incredible.
Yeah.
They were on fire. But the song Land of Hope and Dreams was the first time that we'd heard that. And I think in your letter, we talked about that and how, it represented what we always hoped for our country, for our communities and everything. Yeah. And that one I still, in a sense now more than ever, I lean on.
They're timeless. He's doing song, Backstreets.
Yeah.
It's, stuff like that. He wrote that stuff 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And it still resonates,
It's very fresh.
And I remember when I have two children. One, Orion is transgender, and John was our first. and he's in Nashville, Tennessee. But like Living Proof, the Springsteen song about, him becoming a father and being trapped, but the trap was an open cage. And, but those are the kinds of things I always remember running to that. And just, I went a lot faster than I ever would have run without the music.
Yeah.
But just, stuff like that. You just think about, the landmark moments of one's life and how can one artist consistently help you navigate through that in the creative way that he does.
Yeah. He is close to unique in his ability. So this love for music for you started as a teenager or as a kid? Did your family, were they all into music?
Yeah, I mean,
we're Irish, so it's kind of us, right?
Yeah, so we're preoccupied with despair and doubt, and we're always searching. The Irish are always searching. But my parents were just wonderful people. They were beautiful people. They were both good looking. And I remember when we were kids, they would have cocktail hour virtually every day. And like I'd come home and there'd be 30 people in our house at 4:30. And it wasn't, it was just very social, very healthy. And everybody would be gone by 6:00 and we would have dinner.
Yeah.
But like my mother, when Jesus Christ Superstar came out, she was a teacher at Our Lady of Perpetual Help in the First Ward of Buffalo. And she used to have like listening sessions with priests and the Sisters of Mercy and my brother's friends and my sister's friends. So it was kind of like always with us. Yeah. And my mother had a beautiful voice and always, particularly at family parties would just, belt something out. And so, music, was always a big part of it. My older brother, Mark, had like a room in the basement of our house with all of his albums. And we used to go down there and sneak a cigarette and just listen to Neil Young, listen to Cat Stevens, listen to, oh God, everybody.
All these great songwriters of that era,
Great collection. Great collection. So yeah, I guess it's always been a big part of our lives and in my life as an extension.
Does this have something to do with your decision, when you left Congress and your decision ultimately to accept the position at Shea's and, craft the future of this organization,
Yeah, it without question. In fact, I was invited to get involved with the search process as a candidate for the presidency of Buffalo State University. That's how it started. And I didn't I didn't make a decision to leave, but that invitation came. It was timely. They were looking for somebody. So I was going through that process. And for a variety of reasons, it just wasn't a good fit for me. So I quietly withdrew, I thought. And Buffalo's a small community. So interestingly enough, Shea's search process, you get a consultant and all that stuff. And Buffalo State University used to be college. Their search processes were running concurrent to each other almost to the day. One Friday, I had an interview with the search committee for Buffalo State University at 8 a.m. and an interview for Shea's Performing Arts Center at noon.
It's quite the welcome home.
Yeah. And it was just, but the more I got into the Shea's thing, like I don't have an ear or an eye for a discerning eye or ear for talent. I haven't performed on the stage. My kids did at Aurora Players in East Aurora. They did a lot of stuff. And my uncle has a number of credits as a director and an actor, as does my godson and nephew, Matthew Crean Higgins. But the more I got into it, it's a wonderful institution with a great history. We will celebrate the centennial anniversary in 2026. And Michael Shea, born in St. Catharines, Ontario, at the age of 2, his family moved to Buffalo. He lived in the First Ward of Buffalo on Catherine Street. He was an iron worker. He was a dock worker. And he owned a saloon on Elk Street.
Wow.
And the saloon was one of the first to adopt the concept of singing waiters and waitresses.
Amazing.
Yeah, so
I thought that came from New York City. That's really cool.
Yeah, he was a showman, and then he set out. He had a very democratic view that the working folks of Buffalo did not have access to. At the time, it was vaudeville entertainment. So most of his theaters were built in the neighborhoods, so that the working folks who worked at Republican, Bethlehem, and all the ancillary industries would have access to first vaudeville and then motion picture. And the Shea Seneca was a result of that. I remember as a kid going to Shea's Seneca and seeing horror movies. Now, Shea's is Jake Snyder, the developer, did a beautiful job there. But the seating is gone. It was like 2,000 seats. But the lobby, the ornate lobby in the theater exists. So just it's very interesting. I liken what Michael Shea did, and his opus obviously was the Shea's Buffalo. Yeah. So it was 16 theaters, 2 in Toronto, and then 14 he either owned or operated here in Buffalo. He died at the Westbrook Hotel, which is still there at Delaware in North. Delaware North, yes. And but I liken what he did relative to movie theaters to what Frederick Olmsted did with parks. Because Frederick Olmsted, he came to Buffalo in 1868. Before that, he was a journalist for what eventually became the New York Times. He covered the pre-Civil War South.
Wow.
But he was also, during the war, a public health worker. And he believed in the healing power of parks, an abundance of sunshine, abundance of fresh air. So when he built his park system, he introduced the concept of a parkway. So we have 6 parks, 7 parkways, and 7, landscape traffic circles. Yeah. But he did that so that everybody would have access to the healing power of parks. Regardless of where you lived, you could access the park via the parkway. And if you notice in the Olmsted Parks, there are no fences.
That's right.
There are no gates and there are no walls. And that's, kind of what Michael Shea did in terms of theater, making sure that the working folks had access to live theater, which is very, very interesting. And my other connection is, I was looking, I'm thinking, how do I make, where is this nexus? How do I explain this oddity that I'm leaving the United States Congress to go into to theater management, leadership. And I found that, democracy and theater were found in the same place at the same time. In 6th century BC in Athens, Greece. And actually theater influenced the establishment of democracy. The idea that conflicting views expressed on a stage. Thespis was a 6th century Greek tragic poet, and that's why they refer to actors as thespians. But he introduced the concept of dialogue to the stage, and a protagonist and an antagonist. And the idea is that through that dialogue, the exchange of different ideas,
catharsis,
right? Yeah, with the emotional muscle of empathy, then and only then can the truth arise. And that was the concept that was embraced by those that established, the first democracy at the same time. And it wasn't a perfect democracy by any means, but for the first time, the idea that, there are many people that make this up, and there are many people that will debate issues, and, through truth, through dialogue, the truth will arise. And only the alternative is an autocracy, that you have one person on the stage just, kind of dictating what happens.
Yeah.
So I just say that I'm reverting back to my evolutionary roots of 2,600 years ago.
Well, I love that. That's beautiful. I mean, does that feel like a mandate to you, for how you want to approach this?
It helped me carve out a space.
Yeah.
And, I'm a stranger and people let me in, and I have to be able to contribute something that is lasting and substantial. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. And it's, you build, the theater district right now is a very quiet place.
Yeah.
That's going to change. It should be a destination in and of itself.
Absolutely.
We just did a deal with Musical Fair where they will do 100 net new shows a year.
What a great synergy.
Yeah, and they're going to take up residency for 20 years at Shea 710. Yeah. And we have a lot more announcements coming, all toward the goal of filling in the theater district. I just use as an example, there's a kid across the street from Shea's, wonderful kid. His name is Michael Greco, and he owns the Bijou. But Michael, his business hours, for most of the summer, it wasn't open. And it's not his fault. There's nobody here.
Well, you need customers in order to serve customers.
Right. So what he would do is basically his schedule was built around the Shea schedule, which makes perfect sense. We have him doing a lot of work for Shea's now. And he's a great operator, great quality food, great stuff. I need to try to help influence a change in his business model. And again, it's not his fault that he's not open on traditionally business hours. The only way he changed that is by getting more people into the theater district.
So it would behoove him to be open then.
Exactly. And according to Buffalo Place, there's 109 restaurants, bars, and taverns in and around the theater district.
All within walking distance.
All within walking distance, and all of whom are dependent substantially on Shea's. Many of them, I wouldn't venture a guess as to how many, but many of them would not be open. They're not financially viable without what they get coming into Shea's. So, we did Hamilton for the third time. The first week, we had about 88% capacity at Shea's, 319 seats. They use a multiplier effect from the Broadway League for venues the size of Shea's in the socioeconomic demographic. And we had an impact of nearly $8 million in that 1 week.
During that single run.
Yeah. So that's $8 million that wouldn't come in and to be truthful, our demographic, and we're working to change this as well, is white, suburban, and older. But the good thing about that is we're bringing people in with these shows that otherwise wouldn't be coming into Buffalo. They don't. So
that's a generalization, but largely they don't.
Yeah, and so and we're also working Ujima Theater is a mostly African American, black and brown theater group founded by Lorna C. Hill.
Legend. First
black woman to graduate from Dartmouth University. Her degree was in American intellectual history.
She was just an incredible
Came to Buffalo,
Yep.
went to UB, founded Ujima, taught at Performing Arts. And this theater group, we did The Color Purple, co-produced with them last August. We're going to do a production called Dreamgirls in September of 2025. These young actors are gifted. They're gifted. And we're doing, in addition to the production itself, we're building around it a very robust arts and engagement and education program so that we can look more like the community, and the community doesn't have to look more like Shea's.
That's right. Well, that's very well said. Today's episode of Why Music Matters is sponsored by Buffalo Spree magazine. From the start, Buffalo Spree has been a champion of Western New York's arts community, with every issue showcasing the best of Western New York. What's on stage, on view, in the clubs, and in the concert halls. Pick up the latest issue to get a closer look, or visit buffalospree.com. You mentioned that, and obviously diversification is always part of growth, or should be, can and should be. Shea's, my own history, and before we went live, we talked about a bunch of shows, but I can't even begin to count, but so many legends.
Yeah.
If you come to mind of seeing Elvis Costello there, Neil Young, Phil Lesh and friends, on and on.
David Bowie.
I had front row for that. I'll never forget it. But so many memories like this since I moved to Buffalo in 1990. And it did seem to me that there were less of these kind of like concerts and things like that going on. Is that something that you think, increasing that would help to do some of the things you're saying, like to bring another demographic here to enjoy their Sheas?
Yeah, it's the first question I asked. I said, why is Shea's not doing concerts to the extent and the depth that they've done historically?
That room is...
Yeah, it's great. It's beautiful.
And it sounds incredible.
Yes. Response I received, casinos.
Mm-hmm.
Casinos can pay more. Casinos have built, amphitheater type of facilities around, the gaming operation.
And they throw money in it and have artificially inflated the market.
Yes. That said, I think that we just have to work harder to get it.
Yeah.
And we're going to work harder to get it. I'd love to see the Goo Goo Dolls come back to Buffalo. A lot of the stuff that they do, it's like, music is art. They're looking for a new location. It'd be wonderful to see them in the theater district. Take up the whole place. Everybody opens the doors of their venues. You got the town ballroom across the street. Yeah. You got Electric City, the former Tralf. We have 710, Shea Smith and Shea's. You got the Irish Classical Theater. You have Alleyway Theater. I mean, there's just really, some cool infrastructure which would enhance and amplify events like that. But the Goo Goo Dolls, a lot of their, they're very thoughtful songwriters.
Yes.
That's on Broadway. Johnny Resnick grew up.
One of the best Buffalo songs.
Yes. He grew up in the Broadway Fillmore area, and doing, a thing what they used to do on VH1.
The Unplugged.
The Unplugged, where they it's like a conceptually like Springsteen did on Broadway, and
it was very much that.
But I think there's a lot of opportunity for that. And I saw Springsteen not only in '78 when he opened Darkness, but he was touring solo, and he did The Ghost of Tom Joad. That was beautiful. We were in the first row of the balcony at Shea's.
That show is unforgettable.
Incredible. And, like the song Youngstown, and really powerful stuff.
That could have been written about us.
Yeah. It's just, it's that kind of stuff. The interesting thing I find, there's a lot of focus on like education, and, I never thought in my lifetime that the Democratic Party would be viewed as the educational elite.
Mm.
And in this past election, we lost the middle class that we created after World War II.
And that the goal has always been to serve.
Yes. And, the middle class, they pay our taxes, they fight our wars, they teach our children, they protect our neighborhoods, and we lost them. And the reason I bring that up is, when you go back to the music of Springsteen and its motivational force, where did this guy come from? Yeah. But you know what? In the end, education, we as humans, we are our own deepest mysteries.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we study the humanities? Because it's a study of human nature.
Yeah.
Human nature never changes. Ecclesiastes in the Old Testament, in the wisdom literature, said, "What is will be again. What has been done will be done again. Nothing changes under the sun." That's why Shakespeare is still relevant. What do you write about? Love, hate, jealousy, fear. All of those things. And Springsteen is like, he should have a PhD in the humanities.
Yeah.
And he practices, that. And I think that's why he gravitates and people gravitate to him. in the way that they do, and it's international. And,
it is.
And
even though it's very American, it's also much more than that, just as it's personal and universal.
Yeah. And David Brooks, the author and New York Times columnist, often says, he's a Springsteen fan. This is my goal, is to see Springsteen in Europe, because someone that follows him, you see a YouTube presentation of Springsteen in Barcelona.
It's insane.
That crowd, and it just feeds. It's incredible. But it's true in Ireland. It's true in anywhere in Spain, in Italy. The European crowd is just more into it, seemingly. But I got to see a Springsteen show. And Brooks talks about that. He says, these kids are from Italy, and he went to a show, and they have, Greasy Lake and Highway 9 and, all the things that, a Springsteen fanatic would know about, and they're all singing Born in the USA, and David Brooks is saying, no, you're not. But that's, the kind of reach he's had.
It's incredible.
Both the reach and the depth,
The dear friends of mine just purchased tickets to see him in Milan.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they're pretty excited about that.
Yeah.
That would
for good reason.
Yeah, that would be an experience.
Yeah.
But the diversification, that and the sort of deepening of the tradition of Shea's, but also how helping it evolve for the future. It seems like that's a pretty primary focus of yours.
It is. It just to open it up and to allow fresh air to breathe in and through there. Shea's is iconic. Everybody says that. And I think my humble experience over the several months since I've been there, Shea's perhaps has become a victim of its own success. So it's got the Broadway touring, which is outstanding. Yeah. We have Anne Juliet there. We're going to have The Lion King. Great shows. But what I did when I went there, I looked at the three venues that make up the Shea's Performing Arts Center. And I was looking not to step on anybody's toes, but to find a way that I could add value. So I went back and looked at all the days that were inactive.
Yeah.
So for example, at 710 in 2023, they had 215 active days in a year, which is both production and performance.
Okay.
We will now have 365 days with the addition of musical fare. So it's things like that. We also have inactive days at the Shea's Theater, the Wonder Theater.
Yeah.
How do we fill that in? How do we bring back concerts? There's a nostalgia there. And the etymology of the word nostalgia is homecoming.
Yeah.
And we want to bring people home. Yeah. And there's just, people have just great memories. Like the backstage production people and the front stage production people and the administration. These are people that are talented, they're dedicated, and one thing just defines all of them. They love the theater.
Yeah.
And they'll work their 9-to-5 jobs, and they kick in to working, front of stage and backstage and everything else. And you just see these, first of all, the people that come into that space, they're transformed.
Yeah.
But so are the workers. Like they're just, they're happy. They're into it. They're helping people find their seats. I get more letters from patrons about, a staff member that went above and beyond to make their experience a good one. And we just have to, as best we can, share that with as many people as possible.
Wonderful.
Yeah. The other thing we have a strong arts engagement and education program. So last year, Shea's had about 7,000 students participate, 41 different programs, and from 25 different schools, urban and suburban. But here's my anecdotal conclusion about theater. Theater is important, particularly today, because there's so much social isolation.
Yeah.
Everybody's writing on that, from the Attorney General or the Surgeon General of the United States, Vivek Murthy, David Brooks, Tom Friedman's coming. His next book is going to be called, What Do We Say When We Listen? He said, everything that I missed in journalism, I was talking when I should have been listening. So we're just, it's like a recognition that we got to get back to looking at each other with greater respect and listen to what people say and try to learn what their experience is relative to where they may be politically. So, but anyhow, getting back to theater, what the theater does, from my observation, is expands the capacity for empathy, for humility, for situational awareness and intellectual vigor. So we have a camp, and I'm a novice. I'm just observing to see what I can learn.
Yeah.
So it's 2 weeks. These kids come in. They're from high schools, and they get on the stage and they're taught how to carry themselves. They're taught, articulation, enunciation, diction, the importance of that on the stage. First day they're there, they all got their cell phones, they're looking at them, they're very reticent, they're very insular, they're not interacting. Jeff, I'm telling you, 2 days in, no cell phones. They're on the stage cheering on their fellow Shea's campers. Yeah. And, they become different themselves, but they learn to realize that they're part of a larger community.
That's right.
And I'm telling you, those kids left transformed after 2 weeks. And if you look at a lot of the problems that we have in our society, I've met kids that are brilliant kids at various schools, and they don't communicate well, but they were involved in a science project that, I couldn't even pronounce, what it was called. But it's the development of the whole individual. And that's what theater gives you, because it's so important today, because there's so much social isolation, so much mental illness, so many, deaths of despair, suicide rates among young people. And a lot of it's social media. You think you're part of something that you're not. There's no understanding in social media. It's all judgment.
Yeah.
And I think, you got to have outlets. I mean, there's a place for it and there's value to it, but there's other things. And I think theater, you want to teach your kids empathy? Introduce them to theater.
Yeah, it's very well said. And I think it completely applies in my own experience and observations to music. I mean, there's no question. I've seen this, and I've, run or helped to run music camps for young people. Did one recently this summer. And but a couple hours in, even to the first day, we're working with these kids, the end goal being to, create a well-crafted performance which would take place at the Borderland Festival in East Aurora. We pulled it off. But a few hours into this, we didn't have to say, put your phone away. They didn't even bother bringing them out, because why? They were engaged. What were they learning? How to listen. Big time how to listen. How to listen to the people that are talking to you, but also the people you're performing with, you're playing with. How to put your ego in a place where it's only there to serve the greater good, because nobody wins unless we all win, right? In a band, or just like in theater.
Right.
That's great. And I think it really teaches, without sounding in any way, like condescending at all, but I think I've witnessed it teach young people what an ideal democracy could look like.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of why music matters to me personally.
Yeah.
The older I get.
Yeah.
Because I think it matters to our culture, and our culture matters to our country,
Without question. And theater is about exemplary leader or citizenship.
Yeah.
And, theater is about openings and closings. It's about journey and destination. It's about the poets and the punks. And, the one thing that I have found, the theater never destroys its hope. And however deep you delve into the darkness of the human soul, everything ends with some glimmer of hope. And there's the connection, I think, to music as well. Yeah. As tough as a song will be about a circumstance, Springsteen is a master at that. The chorus is about celebration. The lyrics are about, it's just, it's interesting. There's always that, that glimmer of hope that still exists that helps a lot of people out that get absorbed in that artistic, creative outlet.
Yeah. Very well said. Well, really looking forward to the future of Shea's. Again, yeah. I'm really glad you're back.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Not that you left, but
Well, I we were talking on the way in. I just, it was a situation where I was, I really fought hard for Buffalo.
Yeah.
It's the only thing that mattered to me. I taught history and economics at the Buffalo State College, now State University. They let me. I taught in the economics and history departments. They let me write and teach a course. I taught Anglo-Irish history and macroeconomics, and they let me write and teach a course called the Economic History of Buffalo and Western New York. And I used the formation of the class, Mark Goldman's first book.
Amazing.
Called High Hopes, The Rise and Decline of Buffalo and Western New York. And Mark's a friend. He's written several books, including a biography of John Albright. He's written several books about desegregation in Buffalo. But that was a great, anybody that is interested in Buffalo's history, get his book. I don't even think they're in circulation anymore.
Completely.
You can buy it at what used to be Rust Belt Books. But that is a great book because what he did, he chronicled the rise and decline of Buffalo's economy dating back to the 1901 Pan American Exposition. And Buffalo was the 8th largest economy. But why was the exposition held in Buffalo? Because we learned to turn the natural environment into power. And then we learned to move it based on the works of a Serbian physicist by the name of Nikola Tesla, to Buffalo. And we were able to illuminate our lights. I mean, we were the city of light, in fact, and Lauren Belfer wrote in fiction.
Yes.
But it was just a great history. And what I used to delve into in my class, I used to say, you don't need books in this class. We're going to talk about the economy as it is to you and I. It's we have in America, in the United States, we have a $25 trillion economy. We have 5% of the world's population. We're 25% of the entire world economy. 2/3 of it is consumption, and that requires being confident about your economic future. If you're confident about your economic future, you buy things. When people buy things, people make things. When people make things, people work, they distribute, they advertise. That's just, it drives the economy. That happens to us as individuals, but also happens socioeconomically as well. And my experience was that when I went to Congress, Buffalo had an inferiority complex. It believed that its fate was determined by external forces over which it had no control. Wide right, no goal.
Right.
People were driving around Buffalo with bumper stickers on the back, no goal for 10 years.
At least.
And, when I went after the Power Authority and we succeeded with a $300 million settlement that had to be used for waterfront development, it was transformative for the good public works and the parks and public places, but psychologically.
Yeah, self-image.
And I used to say when I would be out there, if we don't take advantage, if we don't turn this city's economic fate, we have nobody to blame but ourselves. Don't blame it on no goal. Don't blame it on this. Don't blame it on that. We've got to build a new economy. And you know what? Buffalo has been the talk of the nation. The Economist, New York Times, the Boston Globe, People magazine in 2017 talked about the 100 things that are great about America. Buffalo was number 15, right below the Jonas Brothers. But the point is,
I missed that somehow.
People are recognizing, and the big change was, and I just, that's my example of it. There were other factors that influenced that change, but for the first time in 50 years, the population of young Buffalo is increasing, not decreasing.
Right.
The fastest growing neighborhood in Western New York is downtown Buffalo, and it's mostly youthful. Young people that were forced to leave in the previous 2 decades are now coming back because they see a life quality here that they're not getting in Los Angeles or San Francisco or wherever they're coming from. So, but I guess my point in bringing that up is that this has to be sustained.
Yes.
You got to be in a continuous improvement mode, and you got to keep working at it, and you got to keep doing the kinds of things that we don't need a grand slam. We need a lot of singles consistently, and the little things that we did. I put our waterfront today. If I were to grade it on a good day, I'd give it a C. And what that says is that's more than the work of one person in a lifetime. It is continuous, and we should be striving to build on what's done. What's done is nice in some places, but it clearly is incomplete.
It isn't finished. Yeah.
It's incomplete, and the importance of that was that prior to, gaining some traction on waterfront development, the region was defined as old, declining, and industrial, because that's what our waterfront looked like.
Yep.
And when you turn that around to new, vibrant, exciting, the image of the whole region begins to change.
Definitely.
And I think that's where, and then the same is true with the theater district. The theater district was established by other people. Patrick Fagan was the former president there. He had the presence of mind to go after state money, to add 40% to the depth of the stage, because he knew that, and only that, would make Buffalo a premier Broadway touring venue. And we already have a 60-foot wide stage, which is the widest
but
in the country.
But the depth one for certain productions is totally necessary.
Transformative.
Yeah.
Made all the difference in the world. And people that established the theater district, Mayor Jim Griffin, I think it was during his administration that was established. But the point is, they did it not to say, here, this is a complete project. They did it to incentivize future generations to build on it. And that's the kind of thing that will make all the difference. And the stuff we're adding is just a tribute to those that came before us, and a gift to those that will come after us.
Again, very well said. Well, I look forward to what the future brings here, and I'm hoping, excuse me, that the Buffalo Renaissance turns out to be one for everyone, and not just some. And I do always feel that the arts are a good barometer of that, of how well we're doing.
I'm just putting again, we have some very, very talented people at Shea's, and I'm the. They're the musicians. I'm the conductor. And
cool.
And what we're doing is we're putting a publication together right now internally, which will extol the virtues of Shea's as a driver of economic activity in downtown Buffalo. But there's a publication called a report called the Center for an Urban Future, and it looked at the arts and cultural economic sector throughout upstate New York. Page 12 deals with Buffalo, and it's like a hockey stick. Employment in the arts and culture, hockey stick. Economic growth, hockey stick, attributed to arts and culture. So what we have to do more effectively is make that connection that this is just not about, this is not leisure. I mean, it could be, it can be, but the arts and culture are a very, very important sector that is leading the growth in Buffalo right now. And we have to make sure that people know that. We have testimonials from the various restaurants that are saying, our business goes up 30 to 40% when Shea's is active. That says to me, we have to get active as much as we can to help them, to help downtown and the whole, the whole theater district. So we're excited.
I'm excited. I'm excited about it too, and I look forward to many, many more musical and theatrical memories at Shea's. I'm sure we'll be having them. I appreciate you being here, Brian, very
Jeff,
much.
thank you. I appreciate your work, not only, most recently, but your work throughout your journalistic career with Blue Dog and the Buffalo News. And it's been a great contributor to the arts and culture community. And Buffalo is a great entertainment town. And
it sure is.
But it takes somebody that has a gift to help people fully understand what that is. And you have done that for a long time. So I thank you.
Man, made my day. Thank you, Brian. Thanks for being part of Why Music Matters and for your own eloquence and your continued passion and investment in Buffalo.
Thanks, Jeff.